world.
But if a country it is a state that has no capacity at all in promoting human rights.
The new regime in North Korea leaves little opportunities or hope for change, and Slovak soldiers risk their lives to defuse bombs in Afghanistan.
If it is worth it, you are asking if it is worth it? I think it is.
This is The World with Tim Stackpool.
Welcome to the program once again, and thanks for your company. First to Africa, where early action can avert a large-scale food and nutrition crisis in the Sahel region. Chad, Mali, Mauritania and Niger are the most affected so far. Chronic drought, poor harvests and rising food prices have forced most governments to declare a state of emergency. The Sahel region of Africa is a semi-arid zone and runs east-west along the border of the Sahara Desert. Regional specialist Olivier de Schutter described the depth of the crisis to Patrick Megwa.
What is known is that in the areas affected by food insecurity, we have altogether some 10 million people who are affected. 6 million in Niger, 2.9 million in Mali, and a bit more than 500,000 in Mauritania, and some tens of thousands in other regions in the Sahel region. So altogether, it is quite significant. Not all these people are hungry and there is no famine yet, certainly not in this region, but there are signs that this will be very difficult months ahead.
Is the crisis as a result of poor harvests or prolonged drought?
We have a repetition of what was seen in 2010 and 2005, although this time governments seem much better prepared to address the crisis that has developed as a result of the drought in this region during the summer of 2011. So weather-related events are causing this crisis, but luckily governments are reacting relatively swiftly. They have built in, or they are building food reserves to answer the needs of the hungry, and they have learned from past crises, so I don't expect the consequences to be as significant as in 2010.
The international community response to the Horn of Africa crisis has been heavily criticized for being slow. Is there a possibility that we will see a similar situation in the Sahel?
Yes, absolutely. I think what the Horn of Africa crisis has demonstrated in the fall of 2011 is that until the UN agencies officially notify the international community that there is a famine that has developed in one particular region, there will be no international mobilization forthcoming. Unfortunately, the definition of famine is a very strict one that is a very severe crisis, and these conditions to declare famine are not present today in the Sahel. Nevertheless, my message today is, if we intervene now, we can avert the crisis.
What long-term measures do you think need to be implemented to avoid the famine situation growing all the time into a crisis?
Governments must prepare for this by building climate-resilient types of agricultural production if we want in the future to avert further food crisis.
Olivier de Schutter there, speaking about the impending food crisis in Africa's Sahel region. This week we've heard news of the execution of 34 people, including 2 women in Iraq last week. The UN Human Rights Chief Navi Pillay said it was a terrifying number of executions to take place in a single day, even when the most scrupulous fair trial standards are observed. Jocelyn Sambira reports.
Iraqi authorities have been urged to implement a moratorium on the use of the death penalty, according to Navi Pillay, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights office says that 34 individuals, including 2 women, were executed on the same day on January 19. The death penalty can be imposed in Iraq for around 48 crimes, including a number of non-fatal crimes such as damage to public property. More than 1,000 individuals are thought to have been executed in Iraq since 2004, says Rupert Colville, the spokesperson for the UN Human Rights Office.
The total number of individuals sentenced to death in Iraq since 2004 is believed to stand at more than 1,200. The total number who have actually been executed since then is not known, although at least 63 individuals, including the latest group, are thought to have been executed in the past 2 months alone.
Of particular concern to the United Nations is the secrecy with which the executions take place in Iraq. Rupert Colville says everyone, including the United Nations Assistance Mission for Iraq, UNAMI, is kept in the dark.
One major problem in Iraq is the issue of transparency. So we've requested on frequent occasions that, at the very least, before an execution takes place, that the human rights section of UNAMI should be informed, but that's not happening generally, nor are the families informed.
Although the Ministry of Justice and the Ministry of Human Rights say that people are executed after a fair trial, Rupert Colville says there are question marks over the whole judicial process in Iraq.
Where there's due process, very often there's a reliance on confessions. There are a lot of cases where it's clear duress has taken place and therefore the confessions shouldn't really be taken into account. Courts, as a general rule, don't appear to properly examine the circumstances surrounding a confession. And there's also a problem with proper representation and access to lawyers during the initial investigation phase. There definitely is some judicial process, but there are a lot of imperfections. So it's very alarming that on the basis of that process, people are getting executed regularly and in such extraordinarily high numbers.
The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights is stressing that the government of Iraq should stop all executions. Rupert Colville notes that there's a general trend around the world to stop the death penalty. He adds that at least 150 countries, 3/4 of the countries worldwide, have either abolished the death penalty in law or at least introduced a moratorium. Jocelyn Sambira, United Nations.
In an uncommon move, Tanzania has submitted an international application to add 150 miles to the 200 miles of the area that is under its control in the ocean. Under international regulation, a coastal country is entitled to make such a claim in order to exploit natural resources, including fish, minerals and offshore oil reserves. Tanzania's submission was presented by Anna Tibaijuka, Tanzania's Minister of Land, Housing and Human Settlement. Derek Mabatha caught up with the minister in New York to find out more about Tanzania's claim for an extension of its exclusive economic zone, as the area in the ocean is called.
We are hoping that there will be no objection to our submission so that we can be granted this area when we make our presentation in July or August at the 30th session of the Commission. So it is basically a very important mission where we are seeking for an extra area.
Why do you need an extra area?
Well, because this is our right according to the 1982 Convention, the Law of the Sea. Coastal states, and Tanzania is one such, there are 70 coastal states, have a right to claim up to 350 nautical miles from their coastline. Basically, this is a right. Many countries have made such submissions. Of course, you make a submission, but with a justification.
What advantages will Tanzania have if it were to be granted this area?
Tanzania has a number of islands. So if you have islands, you end up with a sizable section of what we call inland waters. So from our coastal regions like Zanzibar, Unguja, Mafia, that's where we have our baseline. We have 24 nautical miles of what is called the territorial waters or the territorial zone. And after the territorial zone, we have 200 nautical miles of the exclusive economic zone. These are the waters where we have rights to exploit the natural resources found in such area. Apart from fishing, of course, you have minerals, you have gas, you have petroleum, oil reserves and things like that. So with the technology so advanced now, you know that the exploitation of the sea for economic reasons is something that has really gained a lot of momentum.
At this present moment, is Tanzania constrained in what it can do to exploit its ocean resources?
Well, as I said, we are really a huge coastal state because we have 1,400 kilometers of coastline from our border with Kenya to our border with Mozambique. That is a whole 1,400 kilometers. But then now into the sea, we extend 350 nautical miles. 200 nautical miles is already secured. Of course, there are constraints because we can't go very far in the south. We have the Comoros, so we are constrained by that. And also further in the east, there is now Seychelles. Then to the north, we have Kenya. So basically, there is this polygon of around 61,000 square kilometers. This is the area which cannot be claimed by any other state except Tanzania.
Does Tanzania have this problem of people from other countries who sometimes go into the waters in other countries and exploit ocean resources?
We have had quite a number of high-profile illegal fishing without licenses. Basically, anyone fishing in your exclusive economic zone should be paying custom Basically, they should be paying and they have not been doing it. I think there were a number of boats which were caught and the fish was confiscated by the Tanzanian state. So this is something that is now increasingly gaining prominence. Of course, as a least developed country, the resources are not always there to keep guard.
Where did some of these boats that were engaged in illegal fishing come from?
Well, I think there were either some Japanese or different ships. They are not sent by any government. They are just companies from different countries. You know, it is like pirates. Pirates are not really sponsored by any state. They are just rogue people who take advantage.
What about the problem of piracy? Is it serious?
It's a very serious problem. And in fact, one of the reasons we think that this exercise should now be facilitated and fast-tracked is that we really have to prevail over this anarchy and lawlessness that is prevailing, which is now also hindering our progress. The issue was discussed very much, tabled by Tanzania at the fourth session of the United Nations Conference on the Least Developed Countries that took place in May last year in Istanbul. And Tanzania, supported by the Group of 77 and China and others, were able to insert the issue of the need for international support in fighting pirates, because what pirates do, they are blocking trading routes for the least able countries. This is something that requires international action, all UN member countries to cooperate. And I am very happy, gratified that our efforts and labor in Istanbul was not in vain, because this issue is now gaining international prominence. And I believe as we speak, even the Security Council is now seized with the matter.
Still in Africa, and the woman who made history when she became Africa's first female head of state has been sworn in for a second term. Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who also recently jointly won the Nobel Peace Prize, will serve another 6-year term as President of Liberia. Daniel Dickinson reports.
Ellen Johnson Sirleaf arrives at the inauguration ceremony in the Liberian capital Monrovia for her second term as President of the West African country. With thousands of onlookers assembled on the inauguration grounds, President-elect Sirleaf walks the red carpet, leading to the stage where she takes the oath of office. The ceremony was attended by heads of state from across West Africa. United States Secretary of State Hillary Clinton was also there. Opposition party leader Winston Tubman and his vice presidential running mate George Weah agreed to attend the ceremony, despite their concerns about the fairness of the election. In her inaugural speech, President Sirleaf mentioned the importance of building on the foundation of democracy in the country, which Liberia has sought to build in the aftermath of a devastating civil war.
We can state with conviction that our country has turned the corner. Liberia is no longer a place of conflict, war, and deprivation. We are no longer the country our citizens want to run away from. We have earned our rightful place as a beacon of democracy.
The President-elect also spoke about the importance of reconciliation as a vital tool for moving forward and for progress.
The cleavages that led to decades of war still run deep, but so too does the longing for reconciliation. A reconciliation defined not by political bargaining or by an artificial balance of power, by tribe, region, religion, or ethnicity, but by the equality of opportunity and a better future for all Liberians.
As Africa's first and only woman head of state, President Sirleaf has always promoted equal opportunities, and she said her second term would not be any different.
Patriots believe that equality of opportunity applies to all citizens, regardless of tribe or ethnicity, regardless of geographic or economic status, and regardless of sex. My administration remains particularly committed to achieving equality for women and girls in all areas of life.
The UN has played a strong supporting role since the end of Liberia's civil war in 2003. During the election period, the peacekeeping mission UNMIL also provided support to the Liberian security forces.
So now to North Korea, which a senior diplomatic official has described as a humanitarian basket case. This isolated Asian country has recently undergone a change in leadership, with the world community hoping it will open up and address human rights issues. Special advisor to UN countries Marzuki Darusman has just finished a trip to nearby Japan. He wasn't allowed into North Korea, otherwise known as Democratic People's Republic of Korea as it's officially known.
It's too early to speculate what changes would be taking place at the moment, although there's a change of leadership. Normally, this is a window of opportunity to change policies, but at the moment, I would assume that the post-leadership change is going to be having to address stabilization issues.
Now, you're calling on the North Korean government to address long-standing human rights issues in the country. What issues are they in particular?
The overriding issue now, with regard to the interest of the people of the DPRK, would be to ensure that the basic needs for a normal livelihood is assured. The right to food would be primary. This is the overriding issue that the country will have to, and the government will have to address in a way that convinces the international community that it is doing something about this, rather than diverting resources for military purposes.
How about political engagement with the rest of the world?
With regard to the international community, I think foremost is, again, to show the world that it is at the point of instituting reforms within the country, and primarily this has to do, of course, with a complete improvement of the human rights conditions.
You've been able to receive information about the human rights situation in North Korea. How has that come about?
We have a credible quantity and quality of information, which I was then able to corroborate during my visits to the neighboring countries that are primarily impacted by the situation of denial of human rights in the country. These information have been amply corroborated and shows a coherent and consistent pattern of human rights violations based on credible sources, including from the asylum seekers and those fleeing from the country that have been on the rise in recent times.
And they have been telling you about the violations that have been going on in DPRK?
Let me put it like this. I don't want to go into the details of what my predecessor had described as horrific conditions. But if a country continues to be a humanitarian basket case year in, year out, it is a state that has no capacity at all in promoting human rights. All rights in the DPRK are state-given rights, and therefore, by sheer definition, there are no human rights, because all rights given to citizens are accorded to the citizens at the pleasure of the state. Therefore, you can imagine that both as a humanitarian basket case and a regime with that kind of ideology adds up to a state where a near total denial of human rights prevails.
Marzuki Darusman there, speaking about the predicted path of human rights in North Korea.
This is The World with Tim Stackpool.
Let's head to the Mediterranean now, and an agreement over the future reunification of Cyprus could move a step closer at talks that are underway in the United States. Cyprus has been divided since 1964, with Turkish Cypriots controlling the northern third of the island, and the Republic of Cyprus composed mostly of Greek Cypriots in the remaining land. Ethnic strife between the two communities engulfed the Mediterranean island in 1974, with world leaders supporting a political solution to the split for over 4 decades. Daniel Dickinson asked Michel Bonado, a spokesperson for the peacekeeping force in Cyprus, what was expected regarding the latest talks.
The Security Council has asked the two parties to work towards a bizonal, bicommunal federation of two constituent states. One would be the Greek Cypriot state and one would be a Turkish Cypriot state, with a view to reunifying the island under a federal government.
Will they get any closer to reunification at the meeting at Greentree?
We certainly hope so. As you know, there was an agreement in 2004 that was put to a vote and unfortunately rejected by the Greek Cypriot side. An agreement is certainly possible. This last round of talks has lasted a little over 3 years now, and it's certainly the UN's point of view that an agreement is possible given sufficient political will.
Why is the timing of this particular meeting crucial?
This particular meeting is really sort of a last chance to get a deal, or to get at least the framework for a deal before Cyprus, the Republic of Cyprus, so that's the Greek Cypriot side if you want, takes over the EU presidency as of July 2012. Now that becomes a problem because one of the guarantor powers, which is Turkey, has stated that it will freeze its relationship with the European Union should Cyprus take over the presidency without a deal with the Turkish Cypriots.
Can you give a bit of background to this whole issue?
It really started right after independence in Cyprus in the early 60s. Ethnic strife started between Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots, leading to a suspension of the constitution, which then led one of the guarantor powers, Turkey, to intervene. It did so in a big way in 1974 and effectively partitioned the island into two. And that has been the status quo since then, since 1974. And there have been numerous attempts at reaching a deal. This is an attempt to bring about a new deal again that could be acceptable to both sides.
Why is it taking so long to sort this out?
Both sides had to sort of go through all of the issues and look at the various possibilities that were offered to them. And this is why, for example, at some point the Turkish Cypriots unilaterally declared a republic in the north of Cyprus, which is not recognized by the international community and specifically not by the Security Council. So they've had to run through the gamut of possibilities, and fortunately both sides believe that the best future for their own citizens, both north and south, is a bicommunal, bizonal federation, given the relatively small size of this island.
This is The World with Tim Stackpool.
And finally, to the story of a Slovak bomb disposal team that has served for the last 6 months in the Afghan city of Kandahar. The team leader, Staff Sergeant Michael Mires, recounts the incident which earned him and his team a distinction for bravery.
This is about helping people, you know. We are here because this country is not the same as my country or your country, you know. People here don't have possibility to go to shop, you know, without being aware that there is something, you know, they should be shot or there should be some explosion of ID.
Michael Mires leads the Slovak Explosive Ordnance Demolition Team, or EOD.
Are we going to be in Hurt Locker 2? Is that what this is?
The Slovaks have worked alongside U.S. forces in Kandahar city since July and have now reached the end of their deployment. The commander of the U.S. Army's Warhorse Brigade recognized the Slovaks for their service.
I think you've gone out on about almost over 60 missions. I had 18 different IED events that led to, you know, over 2,000 kilograms of explosives being taken off of the battlefield.
This ceremony for the Slovak team was an unusual honor. A photo of a particular IED incident had caught the commander's eye.
I think you guys, one of you guys went into the culvert.
Was that you? All you could see was his feet.
The humor of these men belies the seriousness of what Michael did when his team responded to a report of an IED during a peace conference in Kandahar.
There's just one way from the town to airport, and at the end of the conference, insurgent put ID to the culvert close to the main road.
Many IEDs can be dealt with by these surprisingly capable robots equipped with cameras. But when the Slovak team arrived, they realized that the robots wouldn't be able to reach the explosives.
Because the culvert was small, you know, so I couldn't go inside with the bomb suit because there is a big helmet and it is really huge.
So he took off the helmet and top before crawling in.
We disarmed it, and it was a really big ID, and it could kill a lot of people.
That is that selfless service, putting yourself at risk to ensure for the safety and security of the people.
Security, we have 1,285 vehicles in a tight security perimeter around here. All the civilians have been evacuated.
An integral part of Michael's deployment with the U.S. EOD company is training. Michael is given a team leader test, masterminded by colleague Sergeant Salazar.
As far as explosives go, the only thing real is the batteries and the buzzers. That's it. If he makes a mistake, we'll hear a little siren go off. Hopefully we won't hear any sirens go off.
Although there are no real explosives, there would obviously be a cost professionally to Michael if he fails.
You have to have some kind of fear, you know, because it keeps you alive. So you can just go there, do everything in rush, cut the cables and not to think about anything. You have to be there, you have to be a little bit afraid what could happen, but it's something like controlled fear, which keeps you pump your adrenaline and do the things in a good way.
But the job requires more than steady nerves. They call it a craft because it requires endless training and skill building.
We had a lot of training back home, We were trained like for 5 years.
There's the constant sharing of information about the enemy's changing tactics.
When we are here, we have to, every day, we have to learn something, So if there are some incident in another FOBs and another bases, so I try to go through storyboards and learn.
Although Michael goes in alone, it's not a solo performance.
You have to know that there is somebody on who you can rely on. My team, we are working together like for more than 4 years, So we know each other, I can rely on them,
The American EOD team also provides support.
We bring them in and we treat them just like they're part of the company, and they have been since day one. They're part of the brotherhood. Like I said, EOD is a brotherhood, so it doesn't matter what country it is either.
They support us, they work with us. If there is some problem, we go to them and ask them, hey, what to do with this?
Michael freed the hostages without sounding a buzzer.
You make me proud, man.
The EOD must face each bomb like a new puzzle. They can't treat anything in a routine manner because the enemy is always changing tactics.
Tough operating environment. Unfortunately, we lost a soldier tonight.
We have to realize what is this job about, that we can lose our life every day in this job. And so we have to put everything into it because there is nobody else who can do it, If it is worth it, you are asking if it is worth it? I think it is. It is like if I disarm some ID, and it helps and it doesn't kill any people, and I got some experience and everybody is safe back home, it is kind of satisfaction for me, So I think it's worth it.
It's a pleasure.
Jeff Holden there reporting from Afghanistan. And that is The World for this week. If you want to learn more about the program or wish to make a contribution, then please do visit us at www.theworldradioshow.com. There you'll also find a link to our Facebook page, where you can join in the discussions and make comments on any of the items featured in the program. The World is committed to bringing you stories that affect the people of our planet, either on a mass or individual scale, and we hope to do so with balance and integrity. As always, we welcome your input and your suggestions, so please do keep in touch at www.theworldradioshow.com. The program is produced and compiled by Tim Stackpool, and I look forward to your company next time. Until then, bye for now.